protecting cultural and natural heritage, and to address climate change. Now that's huge. There's an enormous amount there to be covered. And in environment, we tend to think of the environment as what's happening outside of us, the natural environment, what's happening in nature around us. But it's actually a lot more than that. It's our immediate environment as well. And our immediate environment has been totally turned upside down in the last year and a half. So where before we could do things quite easily, now we have to really think and be creative about how we are going to approach these things. And our first speaker is going to chat a bit about informal harvesting and the uses of fynbos along the west coast. So I'd like to introduce Elsia, pronounced correctly, I hope, from the South African Fisheries Museum Control Board, and see what she has to say about trying to do this. All the best. Elsia?
Thank you very much.
We need a presentation.
What now?
What?
Oh,
presentation, Helen.
Helen, can
presentation?
Yes.
I have to share.
Okay, Helen will share for us.
Just talk.
Yeah, Helen, can you please put my presentation on the screen?
Here we go.
Thank you very much. I did this on behalf of the Friends of the South African Fisheries Museum. At the museum, we have an established garden, but we have been planning this extra garden at the back of the museum for quite a while. And just recently, we started establishing this extension to our gardens, specifically to stress the importance of preserving the fynbos heritage along the west coast. Next slide, please. In this second garden at the museum, we concentrate on different herbs found on the west coast, the medicinal herbs, edible plants, and also the role birds and insects play in these plants that we have added to our gardens. Next one. And the reason for planting this indigenous garden is to promote the knowledge of how to harvest in nature so that we can always go back to nature. And with the knowledge acquired, we can harvest plants so that they can be established in gardens. And with that knowledge, how to apply to choose plants to put in our gardens so that we can sustain that which nature produced and plant in our gardens. The first choice will always be for plants that are resistant to droughts. Water-wise plants, meaning succulents and bulbs, that they store their water, because we live in an area which we can be regarded as a semi-desert. These plants can be used because they are edible for medicinal purposes. They provide food, perches and nests, a place to nest for birds. When they flower, they attract bees and other insects as pollinators. We know about the bee populations being threatened because of various factors. And one reason for planting these specific plants chosen here is to beautify our environment as well. And one specific plant that I will point out later, although all plants take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and give off oxygen, there's one plant, the speckboom, that does that par excellence. Yes, next slide, please, Ellen. This is the established garden, a garden which I established shortly after the museum moved to Velrif, and we harvested from these plants and the Friendship Garden situated near our municipal offices. We harvested there sustainably to establish our new herb garden. Next one. This is at the back of the museum where we had a garden of indigenous plants, but some of the plants had no bearing on either being edible or medicinal. So those were relocated either to the front of the museum or in other gardens where we needed indigenous plants. The mature plants that had achieved a considerable height, they were kept there. We demarcated a pathway, and the maintenance man at the museum executed that. The straw was used as a mulch, and new plants were introduced. Next slide. Yeah, Zolelani can be seen relocating some of the plants, and the two photos flanking Zolelani shows how he planned the pathway. Next one. This herbal garden, herbal in the sense of being having edible and medicinal plants. This project was aimed at the extension of the existing garden to include medicinal and edible plants. And the reason for establishing this garden was so that we can use it to educate not only the youth, but the broader community, how to harvest in nature, how to harvest sustainably. And the idea is that the Friends of the South African Fisheries Museum will propagate enough of these plants so that we can sell it in order to generate funds. And we do not only sell the plants, we tell the buyers or the prospective buyers what the use of the plant is, under what conditions must they plant it. And by establishing this garden, we are also addressing climate change by introducing water-wise plants. All of these plants were harvested responsibly by myself with an adequate knowledge of veld plants. Some later on, we will introduce some more plants. We have started this herbal garden recently. Some of the plants that we retained from the former garden, they are established, but now we are starting and we are adding new plants and will be adding in future. Next one. This is the one that I referred to earlier, the spekboom, or elephant's food plant. It grows quite easily. It doesn't need a lot of water. It makes a lovely show. There are different varieties of this plant. It's one species, but different varieties. And the leaves of the spekboom is tasty. It tastes a little sour. One can put that into salads and eat it raw. I like eating at least 6 or 8 leaves at a time when I pass some of these plants that I have established. It survives on a very little water, and it can even thrive on grey water. And this is the plant that adds the greatest percentage of oxygen back into the atmosphere after using carbon dioxide. And that's what we refer to as it being an excellent carbon sequestrator, or in other words, it reduces the carbon footprint. Next one. This can be an interesting way. Instead of planting only a straight hedge, one can use it to plant a maize. Why not? Next one. I think not everybody knows that the spekboom bears flowers. As you can see, this one, which is quite a tall plant with a profusion of pink lilacish flowers, but it doesn't flower readily. It must be a mature plant, and the conditions have to be right. That it will happen especially after a good rain season. Next one. The aloes. Aloes are one of the plants that flower in winter. Not in summer, not in spring, they flower in winter. There are a very few species that flower in summer. The gel of the leaves, they are used, they have medicinal properties. It can heal skin wounds, and one can rub the gel on that, but it is used, harvested and used commercially for a wide range of cosmetics, especially for skin products. Next one. This is the elandsfig, not to be confused with the summer fig. The summer fig is found in many different areas, but the elandsfig is found on the west coast. It has a huge magenta flower. In July, it starts flowering, and the size is about the size of a saucer. Yeah, in this slide you can see the insects visiting the flower, which is the way it is pollinated, and then it produces fruit, very succulent fruit, in November. It looks like a kiwi fruit. Next slide. Sorry for this slide doesn't show the leaves, the fruit very distinctly, but it is a juicy succulent fruit about 3 centimeters, and it resembles, as I said, a mini kiwi fruit, and it has a exquisite taste. The fruit can be eaten raw. One just pulls off the filmy skin, and it can be made into a jelly or a preserve. Next one. The bulbine frutescence is a plant that propagates easily. It is drought resistant, but it prefers to be in full sun and not in the shade. Here one can see a bee as pollinator visiting the plants. If one breaks off a leaf of this plant and rub it on your skin after an insect bite or an itchy spot, or use it as a sunscreen on your lips, and it grows in a fairly wide area on the west coast, or it is it is water loving, although it is drought resistant. Next one. Let's see. Get on. The num num is bears edible fruit. It cooks an excellent jam, but it can also be used in other cooking, and it protects itself by having thorns. Next one. The wild dagga has absolutely nothing to do with real dagga, which is Mariana. With the leaves, the dried leaves of this plant made into a tea. It's good against colds and coughs. Sunbirds love these plants, and as you can see in this photo, the round balls contain seed, and it flowers profusely. Next one. This is the 3 slides of the Cucumakranka plant. In the first one, you can see how deep the plant is submerged into the soil. It pulls itself down into the soil. Only the green part is above the ground, and it flowers in January. And this is the fruit that it produces after the rain starts. And you can see the curly leaves. When harvesting in nature, one would only remove 1 or 2 bulbs if you see a whole patch of these flowers together. Next one. Here you can see how many of these plants are grouped together. So, as I say, harvesting some of these plants, you would remove 1 bulb and leave the rest where it is. Next one. The cancer bush was called that because decades ago people believed that it would be able to cure cancer. That is not completely true, but it is still a general booster for general health, and the plant itself easily. Next one. The plucky. This photo was taken in another garden that the Friends of the Museum established together with tourism in Veldhof and the municipality. This plucky, the leaves are used as a wound dressing. Apparently it's also edible, the leaves, although it is not very tasty, and it is a drought-resistant plant. Next one. From the name of this plant, one can deduct that it is a poisonous plant, so it's not an edible plant, but it has medicinal properties. Slide number 1 is the unopened flower. Slide number 2 is the open flower. Slide number 3, one can see the leaves going down at the end of the winter. Next one. Here one can see the biggest part of the plant being underground. Slide number 1 shows the plant, and at the both sides above the roots, one can see the scales which have the medicinal properties. The plant I'm holding there is the one that we harvested, where there were 3 together. We removed 1 out of one of our other gardens, the Friendship Garden, and brought it to the museum to plant there. Next one. These are the scales. It's the 2 halves of the scales that were around the ball of the bulb of the Bushman poison bulb. The flesh of the bulb contains the poison, but the scales are used as wound dressing, and it apparently heals wounds. Next one. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say the can we quickly go back to the previous slide, Helene? The wound dressing and the bulb itself, both of them were used by the sun, and that's where its name derived from. Thank you. Next one. Another slide showing the beauty in creation in spring, which in Velruf starts end of June, July, August is the flowering time here on the West Coast, when we have tourists by the hundreds. And this is what the Friendship Garden looks like. That was established nearly 10 years ago. Thank you. Next one. Yes, one of the recipes in a way that one could use wild chamomile. Next one. Here's a recipe of spekboom soup. Next one. So the reason for establishing this garden was to foster positive human engagement towards maintaining sustainability of the fynbos on the West Coast. Next one.
No, next one.
Yes, the people responsible for establishing this garden was myself, Felicity Strawfeld, and Zolelani, that is on the staff of the South African Fisheries Museum, and the photos supplied by Felicity, myself, and other friends of the museum. Last one. No, but
that's it.
That's the biography, the two sources I used to compile this. And the very last slide is, I maintain if you follow all these principles advocated here, one can create your own beautiful garden and in the same time preserve our precious heritage here on the West Coast, the fynbos. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That was fascinating. Thank you. That was great. I learned a huge amount. The city of Cape Town is hoping to put together their own medicinal garden at some stage. And now we know where to come for fascinating advice. Thank you very much. We've got a nice source of wonderful information. Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the audience? If so, you can either raise your hand or put it into actually just put it into the chat at the moment, and we'll get to questions and things a bit later. In the meantime, let's go on to our next presentation, which is by Kathy, who is going to be talking a bit about promoting the ocean health at Simon, and she's from Simonstown Museum. Kathy, over to you.
Yeah, you got it.
I can see you. And
Thank you. Slideshow. Oh, why does it do that? You can go back. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Just going to talk a little bit about the marine exhibition or environmental exhibition that we're doing at the moment. So we've entitled it Before Simon's Bay because we're concentrating on the wealth of biodiversity that we had before colonization, but we also draw it right through to the present day. So Simonstown Museum is housed in the Residency, which was built in 1777 for the governor of the Dutch East India Company. It was established by the Simonstown Historical Society and some very enthusiastic volunteers, and originally housed in the old municipal complex, and we moved to this building in 1982. The building, as I said, is known as the Residency and has served as a hospital, post office, school, customs house, police station, jail, magistrates court, etc. We house the history of the Simonstown community and their global connections to maritime and world history. And until recently, we didn't really do much about the environmental heritage of our community. But we're changing our focus now to be more holistic and inclusive in our exhibitions and to portray our entire environment and heritage and how our community has interacted with it over time. So we started remaking our early history room, and this is the first room that we've started in, and it's part of our 2040 vision of how we will reinterpret our museum and our collections. The early history room is the first room that the visitor enters, and as it suggests, talks about the early history of Simonstown and the hunter-gatherer influence on the town, and has a case which displays archaeological artifacts. It also has an exhibition about the Antarctic, Martello Tower, and it's a bit disorientating because it's a bit of a hodgepodge. For this reason, we decided on a project of reconceptualization and remaking the exhibition to bring in the environmental and social histories that have shaped the community. We see this as the beginning of a journey to increase the inclusivity and relevance of the museum by incorporating new themes that are of value to our communities. False Bay can be considered Serengeti of the sea. Simonstown is situated on the west side of False Bay and has a unique ecosystem, and it's world renowned for its biodiversity. Our exhibitions and education programs aim to highlight the diversity of our marine plants and animals, from the sponges, sea anemones, sea slugs, and a myriad other small animals, to our huge southern right whales, humpbacks, and white sharks, and everything in between. We have reefs, kelp forests, and shipwrecks that offer shelter to unique marine life forms, which are unrivaled anywhere else in the world. For this reason, the world-famous marine biologist Sylvia Earle chose False Bay as one of South Africa's hope spots in 2014. She emphasized the need to create awareness of the threats faced by the marine life in False Bay and to grow public support for the protection of our unique marine ecosystem. As in the sea, so on the land, the richness and diversity of species found in our terrestrial Cape Fynbos biome is quite remarkable, even though it covers only 0.04% of the surface of the Earth. There are more than 9,000 plants in the Fynbos biome, of which 2,500 are found on the Cape Peninsula. The main Fynbos species are ericas, forestiers, and proteas, with large numbers of bulbs, corms, succulents, and daisies. Many of the plants have value as both food and medicine for humans and animals. Though it's hard to believe, most of the animals associated with the big game parks of South Africa today once roamed alongside or on the Cape Peninsula and the Cape Flats. The Cape lion, elephant, and rhinoceros were at home here, and packs of wild dogs chased antelope across today's Mitchell's Plain, while hippopotamus roamed the wetlands close to Muizenberg. Skeletal remains of elephants and black rhinoceros have been found in the Noordhoek Valley. Most large animals were decimated within a very short time of colonization through indiscriminate hunting and the sheer firepower of the settlers. Today, however, antelope, black racebooks, klipspringer, porcupines, baboons, mongoose, tussies, otters, and caracal survive in the more rural parts of the peninsula. There are numerous reptiles and birds, and the majestic eland and rare Cape Mountain zebra can be seen at the Cape Good Hope Nature Reserve. So our perspective on the exhibition on environmental, marine, and cultural diversity. Based on the environmental and cultural diversity of Simonstown, we embarked on rethinking how to contain while simultaneously displaying the historical nuances that characterize the landscape, both marine and terrestrial. The sources of nourishment that the marine and terrestrial biodiversity offered was the allure of the bay to the indigenous Khoi, the Dutch East India Company, and later the Royal Navy. From deposits of lime from midden mounds created by the indigenous Khoi to the whaling hooks attached to the boulders on the beaches of Simonstown, the historical traces of the migration of people through Simonstown and the surrounding area can be read in the landscape. The historical use of our natural resources and the indigenous knowledge of our community is informing the narrative of the Simonstown Museum's new environmental exhibition. Happily, one of our problems is how to attempt to adequately present the wealth of information and stories about our environmental heritage, and is one that we will continue to work on even after the opening of the exhibition. The themes of the exhibition are the geological formation bay, which has given us our historical history, formed the occurrences of Simon's Bay, the nourishment and healing of its community, the indigenous knowledge of the plants and animals in the area, the marine biodiversity, which is world-renowned, as is the diversity of our fauna and flora. The process in curating and installing this exhibition, partnerships with local conservation organizations have been established. They have each contributed to the exhibition in the form of information, images, and networks. This has assisted us tremendously. We have also fostered new relationships with future partners who intend to make use of the museum space for education, social, and outreach purposes. In order to sustain the museum and its role in the community, we will take these collaborations forward and build them into our vision for 2040. These are just some of the people that we are collaborating with at the moment. We have a firm presence on social media on both Facebook and Instagram, as well as our new website, simonstown.com, simonstown.org.za. And our inspiration for what we're doing and our focus are the words of Baba Diom, who was a Senegalese conservationist. In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught.
Thank you, Kathy. That was great. Thank you so much. Great round of applause from me here. Are there any questions and comments from anyone that they would like to raise? I'm sure everybody does have some questions for both the speakers. Well, clearly your presentations were so good that no one has any questions. You answered them all way before people could get any questions in. I have a question in that how are you getting the people into the museum with COVID? Are you going to be putting any of this stuff online as digital, or are you going to be relying exclusively on getting people physically into the museum?
Is that addressed to me?
Yes, sorry, Kathy. Yes, that's addressed to you.
Yes, we have the website that we mentioned, the Simonstown website, and there will be quite a lot of material on the website, although we would also like to have feet over the door. So we have advertised the exhibition extensively on our WhatsApp groups as well, and we're hoping that we will get feet through the door, but obviously we'll have to manage that in some way. But there will also, as I say, be quite a lot of material on the website.
Thank you. Great. Anything else from anyone? No one. No one's got any comments. Okay. I think that sort of covers quite a lot of things that needed to be said about the environment and museums. Oh, Helene, you have a question?
It's not just a question, but also a comment. We've started with Mandy with referring to the IMD material presented by ICOM, that environment is quite a complex thing. So we've touched on food security. We've touched on exhibitions about environmental issues, but we also know that environmental issues is much more than the birds and the bees, but it's about environmental health. It is about pollution. I see here that sustainable fishing. So I'm just thinking about how can we, the other museums, I'm also thinking in terms of the Cape Medical Museum, how we can deal with things like environmental health in the cities, for example. Maybe Rwanda Museum can also comment on that.
Yeah, any comments from anyone on that? Environment is a very big topic, and trying to include all of the things are, it's tricky. One of the things that we obviously are going to promote amongst the museums is the infrastructure that looks after the environment. So already we've seen about a garden that's really doing well. And then there's things like solar power. Are we using solar power in our museums as well? Catching of rainwater. Then there are other gardens as well. There are loads and loads of things that need to be discussed amongst the whole environment of the museum, and not just, as Lillian says, the birds and the bees. Kathy, any comments, anything that you would like to add?
No, just as I said in one of my slides, is that this is very much beginning steps. So I think that all these issues that are raised, like the pollution and fishing, overfishing and all that, will come into the exhibitions. It's a vast, vast topic, and I think it'll take a long time to actually do it justice if we ever can. For instance, one of the most contentious issues in the Bay in recent years has been the octopus fishing, because it's led to the entanglement of whales and, obviously to their death. And when the traps were banned, there was a lot of people's lives were threatened because they were trying to stop the octopus fishing to, prevent the whales drowning. So there's huge issues that need to be tackled, and it's something that one has to do, not slowly, but in a measured manner, so that you do it justice.
Thank you. And one of the things that we remember as a museum is that being a museum is not necessarily static exhibits about the past. It's about engaging, it's about conversations, about getting conversations going with the people that come into your museum. And if you can't get the people to actually physically come in, then it's about getting engagements, getting topics talked about on social media, whether it be through WhatsApp, which is very often the cheapest way of doing things. Keeping in mind also that not everybody has access to smartphones, not everybody has access to data, but as a museum, we can also be the forum. We can help, even if we get small groups of people in, to start discussing things, to start talking about these problems. How can we make a garden in our own homes? How can we include the information that we've just learned in our own homes and actually use it at home? How can we help with what's happening at Simonstown? How can we can discuss the things about pollution? We discuss the fishing issues. We can discuss the things that are happening. So as a museum, we can then become a portal to get the voices out there. Any other comments from anyone in particular? In which case, we've pretty well used up our whole allotted time that we had for this section. Thank you very much to the speakers. You did brilliantly. Fabulous. I learned a huge amount. And I'll definitely be visiting both of your museums soon. All of the best. And thank you very much. Okay. Thanks, Leon.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Kathy. And thank you, Elsa. And I know that Felicity was there in the background as well. Thank you for your contribution. We've made quite a big gap. In the invite, we've put the first 3 sessions together because we knew there will be very little between them. But the next session, you need to go back to your invite, to a second invite to log in. And we've made a bit of a bigger gap here because I think by now most people are very hungry. So thank you for participating in the morning, and then we come back around 1:15. I will be here at the latest 1:10 to start letting people in, but probably earlier than that. Thank you.